Okay, then item F is discussion on the process for development of teacher and support staff handbook. And we did have a discussion of this, and we've all been thinking about how we are going to go forward with developing our handbooks for our staff. At our policy committee, we did talk about this for a while, and there are probably more assumptions here, and I just wrote down some kind of notes quick from what we had at our meeting for you to look at. And essentially, one of the main ones that we talked about was the first one, of course, that we want open meetings. We want our agendas created for each meeting that allow input from our staff, administration, to determine what is best for us here in Toma. And we want to make sure that we're transparent and that all of the communication we can gather, we get, and is important. We felt we probably are going to be looking at maybe 2 meetings per month because there's a lot of work to do, and we will need to have it in place, certainly sooner the better, and certain items we felt we need to prioritize and approve as we go along, but we do need everything in place, of course, before the real hiring begins for next year, so we're sure of where we're at, and before our contracts expire then. I would think that we would be all in, or many of us, whether it's administration, staff, us, are involved in gathering information we may need and looking at options. So that'll be something that maybe we can divide up and do. And that, of course, as we evaluate everything that we're going to be putting in here, we always want to keep our students' needs first and being fair and equitable for our staff, plus fiscally responsible to the community. So we felt all that was important. And we know we'll be looking at our insurance again, and of course we have had a group in place for that, so we'll probably continue that or see where we want to go with
Hopefully
that.
Get started soon with that.
Right. So there were some, and maybe Mrs. already has a few more things to say. Black River Falls has started process, and as we could determine, it appeared that they were a group of administration and professional and support staff representatives that reviewed and were bringing things to the board. It didn't look like they had board members involved. Right. So there was that model. As we discussed at policy, much of what we're getting from Neola now appears to be based on these handbook questions that are coming up, and most of what was in the contract that will be in a handbook will be basically based in policy. And so, we thought, well, it could be just part of what the policy committee then is working on every month, plus adding meetings. But, the advantage to that, of course, we already have in place a committee with an agenda that's published, and per that agenda we can request and have others come and have input, and we know what we're discussing each meeting, as we would with any meeting, but we wouldn't have to duplicate efforts that way. And we could also have other board members come and participate. They can't vote on anything at that meeting, but everything all comes back to the board as a whole anyway. And maybe they can be all part of the fact-finding also that we need to go out and investigate. We thought we could incorporate that a little bit too. The disadvantage, I think we all kind of, in some way or shape or form, I think need to be involved in this and want to be involved in it. We want to make sure that we all have our voices heard in this and go forward with it along with all of our staff. So, the one disadvantage is that it's just the current policy committee, but I'm thinking we can revamp that a bit. We could create, instead of policy, a separate committee with either from whoever, and then they would essentially do the same thing that they would do a policy, set that up, but it would just be comprised of different people. The one other thing I didn't have on here, and I'm not as familiar with how the community, Pam, you often talk of the committee of the whole, and that is essentially the whole board that meets as a committee. Correct. So that's probably a possible option. Also, posting it that way specifically. Now, whether then if you have a quorum there, you're covered. If not, everybody can come. You don't have to come. If it doesn't work into your schedule, that may be an option too. Maybe that's how we would rather address it. And then we're all involved as we can be. So I'm open for discussion. I don't know how everyone else felt about this, how you feel, how involved, if you feel that policy should just continue on as we get these policies. But I don't think it's as we get them. I think we need to set what we need to go through and determine what we need to work on and prioritize those items so that we get started on it, because there's a lot of questions out there that we want to investigate and get answered, so that there's not any, we don't want everything up in the air. We want everyone to know that we're looking at everything and going to get it going and make it fairly as quickly as we possibly can. So,
having been involved along with a couple other members here on the initial total redoing of the policy book, and that was a massive undertaking, it seems that policy is a place that belongs, and it seems that it would prevent the duplication of efforts. You're already working with people who are very familiar with those policies, and you're not re-educating everybody from ground zero. You're starting out with people who are familiar with the basic policies. I think the idea of posting it as a committee of the whole, so if other board members want to be involved, great. But it seems that policy is a logical place to start. And I think board members' time is valuable. And rather than setting up 2 more nights, it might condense and make for a more effective use of administrator time and board time to work within policy.
okay.
Policy was willing to do that.
Where are you at on policies, though? Is the level of policies that you're reviewing on a monthly basis going way down now, and it's just kind of maintaining? So I know for a long time the meetings were very long. You were going through a lot of policies. Have you?
We still have a mercy rule.
And I think they're going to be long again. Going back,
I think
if we do this, it is going to be the 4 or 5 hour meetings again.
And that's where she was talking about having 2 meetings a month instead of 1 meeting a month for policy, if that's the way this body chooses to go. I and the committee members, we talked about that, and we were willing to do that as a whole.
Yeah, I think that having 2 of them keeps us more, I think when we went into those marathons, at least last year, towards the end, the effectiveness became somewhat questionable, so you'd end up repeating a lot of what you finished the last one on, so breaking into 2 and still being respectful of not just our time, which I agree is valuable, but so of anyone in the community who wants to participate, so it doesn't go into too far in the evening for them either. They can break it up. I think it makes the most sense that we continue to address it, but I like the committee of the whole idea too, so that if other board members are available and would like to attend, that their participation is welcome and encouraged.
So by expanding that committee of the whole, we can give input then during the meeting, or do we just still listen?
That means then, I believe that but not, because it's all completely open meetings, so of course.
We've had a little bit of time to reflect on this and think about it as well. And I'm leaning more towards option number 3. And if I can share a couple of reasons why. I think the policy committee has to be involved in this, but I would like them to be examining the policies, and then their recommendations go to that separate committee. So the committee then, that would give the teachers and other administrators and board members the opportunity to have a second set of eyes on it, and then it could go back to policy with any other recommendations or changes that could then be brought to the board, much like what happened just with the grievance. It was through policy that we first looked at it, then I met with the teachers, we discussed, took it back to policy where the final recommendations came from. I'm concerned that we are going to have policies that come up that we're going to need to focus on. Just this week, we've talked about needing to make changes in our wireless communications policy and a test-out policy, and I don't want those things to, number one, interrupt with the progress that we need to make on the handbook, but those are also issues that we're going to have to get resolved so that we don't hold up work that, we're trying to get accomplished at the school level as well. And then, of course, there are lots, not a lot, but I mean, the whole issue with the looking at different options for the pay scale, that really isn't going to be part of what policy needs to be looking at. So if we can have that separate committee where we post, so that if there is, if we have 2 board members who can be on it, and if anybody else wants to come, but then we create those linkages to policy, I think we can involve more administrators and school board members by doing that.
So you're saying initiate at policy with a working draft or proposal, take it to the new handbook committee, and then bring it back to policy for approval to the full board.
Right. And it's possible, too, that there may be items that the separate committee begins talking about, and so that when policy begins looking at a policy, we already may have feedback for you, too. So I guess that's, did you have anything you wanted to add on that, or?
No, I think it's pretty much something,
It's workable.
We have the same advantages of having the current board policy, because we talked about that. We're going to be, as transparent as possible. Those meetings will be posted. We will have representation, and I just think we can include more people.
and I think the board in general, you ultimately have to decide what you want or what you don't want. So, having a couple people on that committee and that policy committee, it's eventually going to come back to you, and you're going to have to make some decisions sooner or later. So I think in some ways, if you have 2 representatives sitting on the work and the policy committee, that creates even more transparency rather than having, 7 sitting around a table discussing or whatever it might be.
Again, I know it's going to take more time and energy on your part for people who sign up to be part of that committee, but
Are we deciding anything tonight on this?
I think we need to get a sense of what we
where we
want
want
to
to
do,
go.
because we need to begin.
I do, too.
End of September.
I think we need to decide what we're going to do.
You think we can wait? Or you think we need to?
I prefer that we decide on a process tonight.
Yeah, I do,
I
too.
think we need, November's going to come real quickly, the holidays, people are going to be very busy. I think we need to get moving.
I do, too.
Will there be any guidance across the state, input, just, to help too? Or is this, we just create our own and?
Actually, I can tell you that at the superintendent conference last week, WASB asked for any handbooks that have already been created to be emailed to them, so we'll have access to be able to look at those. Also, our local superintendents, the intent is to bring us together on a monthly basis to review and compare what's being done. So we should start getting samples of things, and we have to some degree. I mean, we have much of the work that Black River's done that we can use perhaps as a template in terms of the issues. WSB has information. I think once we establish the committee, we can then, once we establish the process for how we're going to start taking a look at this, we can bring in samples, and the committee, the group can decide.
Although we don't want to do it like Black River is doing it, what they have on there are a very nice selection of topics that are easy to look at and to look and say, okay, these are the topics we mean, and this is the priority, and et cetera. It was a very nice document. The process they're doing may not, I don't believe, is the process we want to do, but the topics themselves were, why reinvent the wheel when you have some very good ones
Once you
out there?
figure out the structure, there's processes to follow to guide the structure to the end.
Plenty of resources.
Well, I do like that idea, too, because there's certainly, as you said, like, the structure of the salary schedule, all those things, those are not on policy. So, that wouldn't go through there anyway, so we'd be doing something separate for that anyway.
Would you like a motion?
Sure.
How are we going to word this? We make a motion to initiate work on the employee handbook utilizing the existing structure of the policy committee with the addition of a secondary committee composed of 2 board members, 2 administrators, the district administrator, business manager, initially 2 staff members representing professional support staff or professional support and office personnel.
You had that written down, right?
No. Combat the creation of an additional committee to work with, in addition to policy committee.
I can pull it off.
Intent of the motion being initiate with policy committee, review with handbook committee before policy makes a final recommendation to the board.
Second.
Before we get it figured out.
Well, I mean,
Could you repeat
What?
that,
Yeah, you
please?
repeat that, Gary.
I heard it from Cindy.
I
heard
think
it
everyone
again
is
from
very,
Mary
very
Ellen.
clear on
Yeah,
the
I do
intent
Can't go wrong.
and how
There you
the
go.
process is going to work.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to formulate our handbook, our employee handbook, by initiating the handbook through policy, reviewing that through a newly created handbook committee, and then passing that back through policy to our board to be approved.
So in essence, setting up a subcommittee of the policy.
Yes, so essentially we're setting up a subcommittee of the board to review the handbook.
Thank you, Cindy and Mary Ellen.
Any further discussion?
Just a question, not that it has anything here or there. The 2 board members on this separate committee, will they be separate, or can they be the same board members that are on policy? Or would we want other people, other than the policy board members? I'm just asking, not that it has anything to do with the voting, it's just...
I think we can determine that. If there's interest and who,
Might be nice to have one from policy, just so that there's a little bit of continuity.
Overlap and kind
So,
one from,
you've been at both meetings, then it can,
clarify anything
Clarify
if
anything,
there's questions.
I just kind of wanted that clarified for
Well,
where
and,
we're going.
when I wrote this up, it was just off the top of my head. So certainly we can amend, we can change the makeup of this extra committee. You hate to have it too large, or you get into troubles,
Well, we are going to be posting them as open open meetings, so it may be wise to have 3 board members so that you have the one coming from policy
And
having
2 others.
2 others. If you want that.
And I'm wondering too, if that couldn't be a rotation, from policy possibly, because maybe in that
Yes.
regard, it doesn't get quite as overwhelming for anyone.
why don't I amend my motion
Okay.
to include 1 member of the policy committee and 2 additional board members.
Okay.
The only thing, if you're rotating, I would caution on that, on this continuity
Yeah.
from meeting to meeting, because I'm sure there will be some unresolved business, and you don't want to come back to the meeting and then have to bring somebody up to speed.
It might be better to have
One with
the
an
board chairperson appoint someone and then have an alternate in case there's a problem, but there's still that mirrors that consistently like we do for other
And I do
other
like the
committees.
idea of posting it as
Open meeting.
an open meet, I mean, an open meeting that,
I guess I would ask though, I mean, if it's coming back from the policy committee to that meeting, and I'm okay with that, but it's still a working meeting of that
committee.
committee. It's not an open meeting. It's open to people to come into the public, but it's a working meeting
It's
of
a
that
working meeting.
committee.
So if we wanted 5 minutes for comment at the start, that would be fine.
That we set some parameters for that. I think that's important because there's a lot of discussion that needs to be talked about and not a lot of work to be done, and we need to move through it.
Stay on
Of course, we want
task
to
and go.
have that transparency, but yet it's still a working meeting.
So policy would review it, and then for one meeting, and then the second meeting would be this second committee, and then the next month, just, so that's, would you, really, the extra committee would just meet once a month, and then policy would review what was being worked on once a month? Is that, or are you thinking that this extra committee would meet twice a month, and then the policy would just review it once a month?
It's possible that the
Yes.
other committee will meet twice a month.
Twice a month as well.
In the policy committee, the way I'm understanding it, wouldn't see any work until it's been completed.
Right.
So there might not be anything for the first month or two for the policy committee to look at until,
Wait a minute, Greg. The way we've been talking about it is it initiates in policy, so they would be working.
well, they would see it the first time at the policy committee originally.
Because they're going to originate it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, then it
Okay.
goes to the working committee. Now, the working committee may spend
Play
more
it.
than a month
Yeah.
on a particular item, and then it goes
Yeah.
back to the policy committee.
For final,
Correct.
yeah.
Yes. Yep, no,
Yeah, and I think as we talk about this, that was part of what I thought too. I think we'll have to determine the items we need to discuss and prioritize them and then divide them up so that we're talking about maybe just, initially 2 things and then, so we're not overwhelmed with stuff all at once. I mean, I think we need to have the priority set where we talk about what's important first, get this done, and then keep moving. Because
sorry to ask, but do we have guidelines for that working committee of what their actual task is for as they come back from the policy committee the first time? I'm assuming we're not rewriting this, we're looking at this and making possible suggestions to it. I mean, I think that's important too, so that the working committee has a good understanding what's expected from the policy committee, where our authority starts and where our authority ends.
Okay.
And I think legally, the authority is just conferring, because it ultimately is a board decision.
The
So I
board,
think,
yeah.
Those are all
In
recommendations.
providing input, recommendation.
And I would envision too that perhaps it gets to a point in policy that they need that expertise from the handbook committee that incorporates more people in it, and we may send it on there and say, okay, we've gotten this far, but we need more information on this, this, and this. And then it would work and flow back to policy that way too. So I think initially we have a lot of setup to do to get ready for that. And that's exactly what you said, Judy. We need some sort of a structure, an outline of where we need to go and what we need to do first.
And that structure would come from the policy committee.
Yeah, I guess so. And from, like you said, not reinventing the wheel. Hopefully we can see some out there and go through. I think we need to go through what's contractually what we have now and determine those major topics we need, as we've kind of done, and see then what order we want to put those in as far as what is top priority to get accomplished first and second and third.
It will be difficult to talk about financial issues
Until,
quickly. I mean, they don't have a revenue limit sheet out for 12-13 yet. I'm not anticipating one till probably mid-October, end of October. So there's just some things that we won't be able to see financially, probably closer to the 1st of January, although that's not what I want to see. That's just what I'm anticipating. That's just an FYI. Obviously, it's your choice, but I think it's going to be tough getting some of that fiscal stuff done.
And is it the intent of the board that the president appoint the committee with input from administration?
The other members on the committee.
Yeah. So we know ultimately, president's going to appoint this committee. Board policy will draft a short, this is a task mission of the committee prior to them meeting, so that there's no misconceptions. Everybody's really clear what that function is.
So we'll need to do that at the next policy meeting, which means we won't be able to get started on this till mid-October, if you approve it tonight.
Unless we have a special policy meeting to work on that before then.
It's 2 weeks away. We have
Got a pretty busy week next week.
retreat this Thursday. So
That's right. Yeah.
I think I mean,
And we'll do it next time.
it'll be here before we know it. We'll just have to make sure we get that on the agenda. So
We'll
I
need
think
that
if you
much
have to
time
sacrifice
be
a little
ready.
time, I think it's better than doing that tonight. There's just some things that we want to have really organized and outlined before we start.
And as far as the makeup of that committee, with what I had here, two board members plus a policy board member, then it's amended to, and then two administrators, the district administrator and the business manager. Two staff members, and that was a number that, I think we may need more. I don't think that's quite enough, really, but we want representation for professional support in the office personnel, which, at times, I'm sure, Greg, you can maybe do that too, because we don't have as many office personnel.
And then I was hearing Mary Ellen, were you recommending that Cindy put together a recommendation of the staff members?
I think we traditionally have asked district office for recommendations whenever we put together any kind of a committee that involves staff, so it would...
And also administrators.
I know we have two administrators plus the district administrator and business
Well,
manager.
maybe that's too many.
Maybe we just
Have one
one
administrator.
administrator, yeah.
And then have one professional, one support, and one office.
I'm
Numbers,
more
I'm not sure
comfortable
if
with at least two, support and professional and office. I don't know if we'll find, the office numbers are...
I know there's not a lot of
people
office
that
staff.
are, but I think the teaching staff having two representatives.
Well, and I think too, that's going to help is, and the fact of the matter is, I'll say, we're not negotiating, we're seeking input. There's a difference. So maybe that makes those committees a little bit more efficient to some extent.
I think it will.
Madam President, we have a retreat coming up in 2 days. Perhaps all we've discussed here this evening will go on into Thursday as far as thought pattern of what's going on here with this committee.
I think the
Wouldn't
agenda
it? Agenda's already set?
Yes.
and posted probably.
And posted, but we have time that we could
We could add that to it.
We can
Yeah.
repost that.
If some other ideas come up.
I would like to see us approve the process tonight. I'm not so worried
About the makeup.
about the
About the
makeup
makeup.
if we can get a motion that gives some flexibility for the makeup, because it does not matter to me if we have, two teaching staff,
Well, you had the more...
whatever. I simply read, when making the motion, I just read it right off there. So I'm very open to amending that, but I do think we need to set the process up tonight, because otherwise, we're going to get into October near the end of October, before we can get anywhere. This way, at least we can get a process down and appoint people and start at the end of October, beginning of November, and otherwise, I see it's going to be 6, 7, 8 weeks.
Right, it's going to be too tight.
Well, I think the original motion was adequate, wasn't
I do
it?
too.
Unless you want to amend it to say that the non-board members are individuals that will be recommended by Ms. Sardi or...
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
You're fine with how you...
you still have my second.
My motion tied it too much. You need to amend my motion so that it doesn't say just 2 board members. We want it to be a member of the policy committee plus 2 additional board members
Do you have to,
and other personnel as appointed by the board president.
Then we can work on the numbers.
Yeah.
Seem to work. That's fair.
That's fine.
We can do that.
If the second will agree to that.
I already did.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the process to formulate our employee handbook, which is initiated through our policy committee, and then with the formation of a new separate committee, a handbook committee, that will be comprised of 1 board member from the policy committee and 2 board members, plus members designated by the board president. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I know you got that all written down, Greg.
there,
You can leave out the uhs.
pull out the DVD?
It's a lot easier the way we finally came up with
Yeah,
it.
leave out the uhs and the ayes and all that.